it's never a gift. Know who I am, I know what I'm not. I never be faking, it's always legit. Started with nothing and I made a lot. Put food on the table, now everyone lit. We not the same, I put in the work, I never complain. If I were to fall, I'm taking the blame. While they all be pointing the finger and that is a shame. Know it's my time, they calling me Dame. The game on the line, I'm running the play. Man of my word, I say what I mean and I do what I say. Looking for me, but they not even part of my league. I've been on fire 200 degrees. Out of Miami, but repping the sea. Live in the sky, I'm feeling the breeze. Never went Hollywood, did it my way. I felt the love and I've been betrayed. I took the knife in my back and I sharpened it. Now I'll be coming for everyone, black in my lane. I put the game in a chokehold. They'll be moving in slow-mo. Shooting my shot from the logo. And I be cooking up so low. I be the only one calling the shots. Nobody else ever taking control. They'll be trying to put me in a box. I can't relate to no internet trolls. They can't do it like me. Too locked in, I've been in my zone. If you don't ride with me, then I'ma make it on my own. Waiting for my demise. Been too long, I'm never gonna fold. Violence all I see. Feel like my mind in a war zone. Yeah, let me take you back to when I was starting out on the come up. I was grinding till the sun up. My neighbors told me to shut up, but they couldn't see the bigger vision. Got no intuition, now my taxes more than that tuition. They see how I'm living and my idols becoming my competition today. I remember I was making under minimum wage. It was part of the story, but now I'm turning the page. And I got bars for days, but can't be locked in the cage. I've been underrated, overlooked like a speed limit. They've been trying to slow me down like I got a speeding ticket. I got demons I keep hidden in the back of my head. I'm not vegan, I keep feeding off the shit that they said. I've been living out my dreams while they stuck in their bed. I've been thinking like a king till the day that I'm dead. I remember when they never would've listened to me, and now I'm everything that they ever been wishing to be. I've been working overtime like every day of the week. I've been studying in school, already got a degree. Trying to make it to a doctor, I've been working on my patience. I'm trying to make a living with multiple occupations. Coming out of the basement on the radio stations. I'm going face to face with all of my contemplations. I feel like God's gift and this is my celebration. I'm trying to lead the way for all the future generations. I don't want them calling on my phone. I've been on my way to the top, no ceiling. They leaving a message at the tone. Trying to get involved, but I really don't need it. I don't want them calling on my line. I know what they wanted and it's not no secret. I'ma tell them that I'm doing fine. Trying to get involved, but I really don't need it. I got old friends slowly turning into enemies. I got people in my life trying to block my energy, and I'm trying to keep my focus surrounded by Hennessy. People drinking every night, trying to fade their memories. I've been working out my mind, staying focused mentally. I've been watering my grass, trying to grow my money tree. Not reacting to the lies, I don't know the chemistry, but I know that everything will happen how it's meant to be. From a small town, trying to make it out to better living. No reminiscing on memories and shit I was missing. No politician, but they listen to the shit that I say. On my way to better days, I never seen a delay. I've been highly debated, I'm never jaded to the life. Not degraded by haters who busy wasting all their time. I've been murdering beats and now they be calling it a crime. Working while the sun down, waiting for my time to shine. Now they say I'm rapping about the same thing every time, but I'm always seeing people with their focus out of line. I've been sending the message until they get it, trying to let them know time is too expensive, I can't never let it go. I don't want them calling on my phone. I've been on my way to the top, no ceiling. They leaving a message at the tone. Trying to get involved, but I really don't need it. I don't want them calling on my line. I know what they wanted and it's not no secret. I'ma tell them that I'm doing fine. Trying to get involved, but I really don't need it. I miss roll around town hanging out of the whip. Nowadays life just feel like a mess. Sometimes wish they didn't know I exist. Feeling the pressure like are they impressed, or is all of this shit gonna come to an end? Save it or spend. So many questions I don't know the answer. It all just depends how I'm feeling when the day is starting. Sometimes good but the others darker. Check my phone to see what they talking. They got a lot to say but I beg your pardon. Losing hope when I don't see results. I came so far but I'm still not close to what I wanna be when the curtain's closed. My life not normal, I can't lose hope. I'm far from normal. I'm far from normal. They don't understand the shit that I just had to go through. Yeah, I'm far from normal. I'm far from normal. I've been doing everything that they all said I won't do. Hey, check my phone and see my mama calling. I don't wanna talk, got a lot of problems. Some of them still too far from solving. She can hear the pain in my voice when I'm talking. Yeah, I don't know what's gotten into me. I'm turning into my enemy. Whole lot of money that's sent to me, but nothing ever be helping me, cause I be struggling mentally. Yeah, I did a lot, but it's not enough. Proving myself is the shit I love. The more that I get, then the more that I give. 100% that I put into this. Leaving the past and I'm making some room. I know that my blessings gonna be coming soon. I cannot ever go hide away, cause people depend on the shit I say. They don't really know me like they think they do. I've been through a lot of things they never knew, but everything I do is all part of the plan. Yeah, they hate it or they love it, they don't understand. I'm far from normal. I'm far from normal. They don't understand the shit that I just had to go through. Yeah, I'm far from normal. I'm far from normal. I've been doing everything that they all said I won't do. I put the team on my back. I do it all for the family. Everyone think they can rap. Nobody ever gon' challenge me. Starting my week on a Sunday. They think they can make it in one day. I just been ready to take off. Waiting my turn on the runway. Never be turning around. Never be turning around. Ayy. Never be slowing it down. Never be slowing it down. Ayy. I keep my foot on the gas. I keep my foot on the gas. Ayy. I know I'm never gon' crash. I know I'm never gon' crash. Ayy. Never be turning around. Never be turning around. Ayy. Never be slowing it down. Never be slowing it down. Ayy. I keep my foot on the gas. I keep my foot on the gas. Ayy. I know I'm never gon' crash. I know I'm never gon' crash. Ayy. Everyone making excuses. I've been busy making music. They just wanna see me fall off. Know that I'm never gon' lose it. Got addicted to the chase now. People saying that I changed now. Know that I'm never gon' stand still. I'm treating the game like a race now. They really been carefully watching me. They treated me like I was calories, but really they can't get enough of me. They treated me like I'm a salary. They bringing me up in discussion. They wondering how do I do it so casually. I celebrate all of my victories. All of a sudden they all gonna be mad at me. Damn, I don't have time for concern. I just go live and I learn. Trust me, I waited my turn. Living my dream in return. This is a given, it's earned. People been listening over the world. I've been making that money while I be asleep. I never ran to the money, but now all the money been too busy running to me. Ayy, I put the team on my back. I do it all for the family. Everyone think they can rap. Nobody ever gon' challenge me. Starting my week on a Sunday. They think they can make it in one day. I just been ready to take off. Waiting my turn on the runway. Never be turning around. Never be turning around. Ayy. Never be slowing it down. Never be slowing it down. Ayy. I keep my foot on the gas. I keep my foot on the gas. Ayy. I know I'm never gon' crash. I know I'm never gon' crash. Ayy. Never be turning around. Never be turning around. Ayy. Never be slowing it down. Never be slowing it down. Ayy. I keep my foot on the gas. I keep my foot on the gas. Ayy. I know I'm never gon' crash. I know I'm never gon' crash. Ayy. I'm not doing this for the money, so don't misinterpret my last line. The weather ain't always been sunny, but I know that I'm gonna still shine. You never gon' make it till you got the power to go and develop a strong mind. Cause everything happens where you don't expect it. The journey ain't given a deadline. I'm going till I got a flat line. Connecting with people like landline. I've been blowing up like a landmine. I put myself on like a combine. Knowing the way that they go and I'm ready for more. I don't wait on the sideline. I'm feeling like 2011 when Drizzy was dropping them hits like his headlines. I don't understand what I can't do. If I cut you off then I had to. I'm staying up late like it's fast food. The life of a rapper who in school. I don't wanna hear all the people who've been trying to give me advice. If you haven't done it before, then don't give your opinion about what you
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, and welcome to Thursday's Security Data Operations. Holy cow, what a week it has been. Chat, you would not believe the crazy week I've had. We can get into that a little bit later. I'm super excited for today's stream. I'm super excited to have made it back. I drove from Atlanta today, started about 5 o'clock this morning, so I've been on the road for a hot minute. But I had to come back because I had to see you today, chat. So welcome, everybody, to our February 13th episode of Security Data Operations. This is our bi-monthly stream where we talk about all things security operations, data operations, and the convergence of the two in the modern day cybersecurity team. You like that? I've added the sound effects to my convergence. Absolutely. You can tell the caffeine is still rolling, even if it is 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Let's hit the rules really fast before I get to my guest for today. Obviously, the number one rule, the one we always talk about, no toxicity. No toxicity. What does that mean? We have no racist, sexist, misogynistic, elitist, or otherwise toxic behavior in chat whatsoever on any of the platforms. We are streaming live across LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, and X. We do have moderators in each of those platforms. I do give a huge shout out to our moderators that do work for free, and the minuscule antics that I give them to keep them, invigorated through the day. They are here to keep chat free of all of those things that I said we don't tolerate. They are not here, however, to stifle chat in any way whatsoever. If you're new to the platform, we do absolutely welcome and love for you to communicate and chat with your fellow cybersecurity professionals on your respective location, whether you're on Twitch, YouTube, LinkedIn, or X. Not here to stifle chat. Leads us to the second rule, which is more of a reminder than it is anything else. We absolutely love questions on this stream. Again, if you're new to the stream, we welcome questions at any point in time. Our moderators are constantly watching chat for any questions, comments, anything like that they see that looks interesting. And they'll add it to a queue. And if they need to at any point in time, they'll push it up on screen, similar to what we're seeing right here from Bryant Peak about game time. So they'll grab that, put it in a queue, push it up there. So we do encourage you to ask your question at any point in time about anything we happen to be talking about, whether it's relevant to our current subject or whether it's something you want us to answer towards the end of the stream. We encourage you to do that throughout the stream as well, instead of waiting for a dedicated Q&A at the end. This way we can have an interactive conversation, and if we talk about something that's particularly interesting to you, you can get on top of it. 2 quick programming notices before I introduce my guest. Number one, the giveaways I promised you are live in Discord. We've got 2 giveaways running right now in Discord, right? We've got one going for 3 months, 3 1-month vouchers. We're giving away 3 1-month vouchers for Try Hack Me, and we're giving away $50 Hack the Box gift cards as well. So make sure you are over in Discord. Make sure you are in the giveaways channel. Make sure you do have that checkbox checked and you are participating in the giveaways. Second piece of programming notice, I will not be doing Tea with a Hacker in the morning, but fret not. Fret not. We will be streaming in the afternoon. Unfortunately, I've got a 9 o'clock meeting in the morning tomorrow that's going to cause me to miss Tea with a Hacker. Nothing I can do about it. That's life. And so instead, we're going to do our stream at 3 o'clock in the afternoon tomorrow. It'll be Jason and I doing the threat brief, and we'll do a little bit of Q&A, and I'll announce some more giveaways. Lots of giveaways. All right, with that being said, I'm excited to announce and welcome for the first time on Cyber Insecurity. It is his first appearance on Cyber Insecurity. Everybody, please drop some dubs in chat, put some claps in chat, drop some narwhals in chat. Help me welcome, put your hands together for Rudy Ristich, CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, and Chief Privacy Officer for Avant. Rudy, welcome to Cyber Insecurity, sir.
Hey, thank you. Glad to be here.
How are you?
You have to give me that green room playlist. That's what I want out of you right now. I can tell you just been back and forth from Atlanta.
Yeah, I do need to get the bot that like drops in all the music that plays from the playlist. Thank you, Spotify, for that. Being able to find some good music on that one. Rudy, I always brag about our guests when they come on board. I'll give you a chance to kind of self brag. But what I find is that if I don't brag about you, you end up getting a little modest, and we don't really get the good stuff out of you. So, Chad, I want you to understand just how amazing Rudy's background is, right? So, Rudy, you started your cybersecurity career as a security analyst at SecureWorks. So you've got hands-on keyboard experience, fighting the bad guys on the front wires. You've been a security architect. You've spent some time at, a large financial firm. Some of them may have heard the name Bank of America. I know it's not as large as people think it is. But you're also a board member and an advisor for a lot of companies and the co-founder of the Workshop 88 hackerspace in Chicago. So you're very active in the community and you've done a lot of stuff. Did I miss anything about your accolades?
You got a lot of them. I think one big thing that's super important to me that's probably just not apparent on my resume is do a lot of work with the collegiate cyber defense competitions. Kind of always had like between red teaming and architecting those, and a great way to get younger talent kind of up through and really practical skills, put them in the kind of pressure cooker for a couple days. I know small teams, kind of grueling, but over the years I've recruited a lot of people to that venue. So would encourage anyone that's got the, I guess, benefit of being at a university that participates in that stuff to get involved. And if your university doesn't, try to find someone to sponsor a team and get involved in it.
I can absolutely second that. You're referring to some people may have recognized it as CCDC. CCDC is
Exactly.
CCDC is a fantastic endeavor. Give me just a second. My audio team's telling me to bump your mic just a little bit, Rudy.
All right.
We'll bump you just a little bit there. Let me know, audio team, if that works really well for Rudy's mic. CCDC absolutely, can wholeheartedly endorse that, and thank you for pointing that out. Chat, Rudy, we've got an awesome lineup of things that we're going to talk about today. I'm super excited. I know the fundamental title down here is Security versus the Business, Finding the Balance. Rudy, I'm going to lead you down a path that I think will hopefully articulate that for our audience. But before we do that, you've been in this space for a while. You've started out as an analyst on the field. You do a lot of work with the community. You do a lot of work with collegiate students. And so I always ask my senior leaders when we bring them on the show, over your career, what stands out to you as one or some of the biggest challenges that you've witnessed in the industry?
Yeah, I think as far as the industry goes, challenges really the toughest part I think about what we do is it's constantly changing, yet always coming back to the same fundamentals over and over again. I think for me, when like mobile was up and coming, I came through that whole arc of everything was effectively desktop based, maybe you had a few laptops, no real VPN type use, and then all of a sudden like mobile comes back around, and you have some of the same insecurities that we were finally getting around to, like automated patching and things like that in the desktop space, but you have the same problems crop up within mobile. And then as I was transitioning away from SecureWorks into like more big public tech, part of my focus was like Internet of Things basically, and it's basically you're revisiting the same problems over and over. And then it's also challenging, I think, being on the provider side of things. All the fires that we're fighting and solutions that we're coming up with are very much like band-aids for edge case problems, where we always end up kind of back to like taking care of a lot of the fundamentals, takes a care of a lot of the problems that you'll end up with. And then it's basically, we've got all these eye charts that you see, like all these companies all over the place. And it's, how do you make sense of who's doing what? And it's like some of those things are essential in the moment, and then like they end up like kind of collapsing, and it's just like contracting and expanding ecosystem that we're always dealing with, especially, like in the position I am now, we always have to like look at our vendor population, evaluate what we're using as far as like controls and things like that. And that's been challenging. And then I think the other kind of challenging aspect is just businesses are always changing, requirements are always changing as well. And we have to like kind of find that balance there. So I know you have like your marquee is security versus the business, but really want to kind of like challenge that. It's more like, how can we partner with the business and like really like not make it like contentious, but make it one of those things where, hey, like we're trying our best to make sure catastrophic things don't happen. Like where can we find the middle ground between what we need to do to kind of secure the environments and also enable the business to get business stuff done, right?
Let me ask you something. I want to pull on that thread just a little bit, right? Because we talk about sometimes these changes over the industry. How do you fight a little bit of that fatigue that I'm sure you've experienced, where it feels like you're fighting the same challenges throughout your career?
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, not this thing again, like the habitual like you're back to the facepalm moment type of a deal. I think for me it's kind of how do you remain like grounded? I think what it does is when I see the same problem again and again, and I have like throughout the career, take a step back and kind of get grounded to the fact that like there's a lot of confidence in the fact that okay, if you've solved this problem one way before, you're going to be able to find a solution for your business on that going forward. Because a lot of times, like if there's some kind of crisis afoot, or you're dropped into the middle of an issue and people don't know what's going on, that's when they're kind of like at the most vulnerable and the most like looking for guidance, and that's when your leadership can step up and basically like take course there. And I think it's what people think they want, like accuracy or something like that, but what they really want is they want certainty. So trying to give them the level of comfort that basically yeah, we've seen this problem before. It's just a ilk of a different color type of a thing will approach the problem XYZ different way. So I'm talking kind of in generalities there, but
Yeah.
a lot of the crises that come up can be anything from, is it like compliance related crisis, or is this like a really like hard technical type thing? It's like you got to run that gamut from top to bottom of the stack. So
Yeah, I think I think I would double down on that, right, and say like it may feel sometimes like it's the same problem to you. It may feel like it's groundhog, but it's a different company,
yeah,
it's a different scenario, it's a different world, it's different people that are working for you, working with you, working in your partners in the business. And so it may feel like the same scenario, but the elements that are contextually relevant around that scenario are vastly different than anything you've ever dealt with before.
yeah, it's like design patterns and mental models and stuff like that. I'm a big fan of those type of things. I'm always like digesting that type of stuff as they come along. Sometimes new mental models are helpful, and sometimes they're directionally correct. But putting structured thinking around things in a crisis is, I think, something that if you can bring that skill into your repertoire, especially if you're operating at the level that like you and I are,
Mhm.
it's basically one of those things that helps you be like a Swiss Army knife for whatever the problem at hand might be. So, and it extends to business problems too. It doesn't have to be like a cyber specific problem. So
Absolutely. All right, let's dive into this a little bit. I'm excited for this. I'm excited for this chat with you today. I want to start by let's start by focusing in on threats specifically. And so from
yeah.
your perspective as a CISO, obviously understanding threats is huge to the security organization. What are some of the top threats that you're specifically looking out for in 2025?
I think our big things this year is effectively what's going on within like the fraud landscape. I think is a big thing, specifically in the type of business that we're in. Ultimately, there's been a lot of breaches out there that effectively have released a lot more information than just your typical like username, password, social security number, address, and basically it makes it easier for people to kind of like effectively circumvent things like know your customer type stuff. So like how is that evolving? And then also I think there's like socioeconomic things that like kind of feed into that too. It's like when there was stimulus coming out from the government effectively to put money in people's hands. The fraudsters like turned to the government to defraud the government, basically get that money. And then when that dried up, they turned back to like consumer sector type stuff. So we definitely saw an amp up in that. And, if things continue to be, kind of limited in that space, you might see all those avenues of the fraudsters dry up. Because one thing I believe is there's kind of like a fixed pool, I guess you could say, like there's a fixed apparatus of the amount of avenues available. And there's probably tons of like cyber criminals out there, but they're effectively, how where they're focusing their time. There's only like a finite set of those type of people. So if one well dries up and they find like another easier avenue, they're going to shift their direction there. And then, moving away from like kind of the more commercial stuff that's really like specific to our sector. It's, how does artificial intelligence amplify things at the speed that we're trying to basically take advantage of that within the business to kind of like accelerate and keep ourselves lean and effectively get the job done with, the same to less. How can we basically, what's that going to do to the pace of our threat actors and stuff like that? So that's kind of like the other big thing. And then I mean, in my world, there's just a couple new compliance regimes coming down where I know that's, not the sexiest part of what we do, but it's super important for our business to be able to land in that. So we're definitely looking at, okay, are we going to be able to meet all like the new compliance regimes coming down? And it doesn't include just like the, your typical like PCIs and, like other frameworks that we operate against, but, also So like there's legislation and regulation around artificial intelligence. We're looking into that type of stuff, like adopting frameworks for that. So.
Let me ask you that on that topic, right? Because you did mention like a lot of the fraud related stuff, which can obviously boil down to a lot of technical controls and a lot of technology. You know, even on the AI side, we can get into a lot of the security applications around AI, whether you're protecting the LLMs inside your organization or using them inside your SOC to help your SOC efficiencies. But also, you mentioned the compliance side. How hard is it for you to balance technical solutions with compliance risk?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a kind of a give and take. It's probably also like you got to get creative, I guess, from time to time. Is there's a lot of things I think that my fundamental belief, I think, with all things like security versus compliance, if you want to think of it that way, is if we're doing fundamental security things well, 80 to 90% of what we do or asked to do, I guess, by the compliance frameworks and compliance regimes and things are going to take care of themselves. But then there's always things like, do you have a 12-character length password? Like, I would prefer to have no passwords whatsoever. It's like we want to get away from that to pass keys and move on to things like more two-factor authentication, where it doesn't really matter if it's 12 to 24. It's more about making sure people aren't leaking their second factors, third factors, that type of thing. So basically, I think how do we get to like a happy medium there is basically getting creative on, okay, if we're not meeting a control directly with the technical spec that we think we should, is there a compensating control there? And all but one in my instance, I think we've been able to find like a adequate compensating control for something technically that's just not achievable because of one XYZ thing for the business. And even to the point where, further back in my career, we were working an issue trying to get basically antivirus across like an entire like large international network, and the costs there were not astronomical but very high. But then also like you get into a realm where they're throwing a bunch of smart actuaries at it, saying, hey, like in a 10-year span, we'd expect us have $31 million of losses. So the good business decision there is to like not put this control in place. So how do you negotiate with the powers that be about that? About, hey, this is the right thing to do from a business perspective because we might incur some losses, but we might spend something like $31, just to scale it down, but we're absolutely going to spend $41 on an annual basis per system if we're not going to do this type of a thing. So there's those type of challenges. And I think those are the type of things that make a lot of the guys on the architecture and ops side kind of twitch a little bit when they hear those type of things are happening.
Well, I think that's interesting that you say that, and I definitely want to dive into that. So are you saying that it's definitely part of one of the things that you do in your role to balance that technology might not be the right answer? It might be okay to allow the risk to exist in the organization?
I think at some point, ultimately what you have to do is like understand your organization's risk appetite and where they're willing to incur as far as losses go. Sometimes you're in an organization like very, very large moat to protect, very, very low risk appetite, and they will, essentially give you a blank checkbook to go after whatever you do. And sometimes you're in an organization where, ultimately it's your ultimate duty is like fiduciary towards the shareholders. So we're making the right business decision here. It's like, would we rather spend $600 up front or, and have a certainty that we're going to incur that cost, or the likelihood that we might 10 years down the road have like an $800 spend type of a thing. It's like, are we comfortable rolling the dice on that or not? And that's not like a decision I can make in a vacuum. That's something where you have to partner with the rest of the team, with your boards and everything, and understand ultimately what's everyone's thinking on that as far as the pain they're going to incur in the moment versus the avoiding the pain perpetually. So
let's dissect some of that pain a little bit, because you used a word there that I think I want to kind of educate the cool. audience on a little bit. You said risk appetite a little bit. Mm-hmm. How do you assess risk appetite? What is risk appetite? How have you seen other organizations' risk appetite? Can you kind of talk through that just a little bit?
Yeah. So I think the most, if I'm explaining it to like my mother or an 8-year-old or something like that, it's like, how much pain are we willing to incur in the likely or unlikely event that the bad thing is going to happen? And is that going to be tolerable in our current operating model, or is it going to be intolerable? Like, is it going to jeopardize our goals, jeopardize our strategy? And then how do we get there ultimately? In my experience, a lot of conversations with people who are responsible for all those aspects of the business. And I've worked with what would you call it? Businesses where ultimately it's very much a feely type of a thing, and others where it's very much hard math. There's literally people like behind a desk with lots of certifications in mathematics that know how to do like a lot more math than I've ever done in my life, that come up with a very compelling thing that like, hey, like all the data tells us the likelihood that this thing is going to happen is like, once in every 20 years. And, then you got to think, okay, well, like how fast does this technology turn over? How long does this threat exist? If technology turns over every 3 years, are we really going to, like double down on a spend because its likelihood is very, very minimal. So.
Do you feel like cyber insurance has helped or hurt most organizations, risk appetite levels?
I think it's influenced it maybe a little bit like unduly. I guess I can only kind of speak for the kind of like experiences that I've had like directly working with them. But I'll say a lot of what they're looking for in the premiums are definitely like when you go, maybe the audience does or doesn't understand like what entails when you go to a kind of market for like a cyber insurance, or even why you want to have it, right?
You can go ahead and explain a little bit of that.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to assume common denominator
Okay.
on that. Absolutely.
Right on. Okay. Well, ultimately, there's quite a significant amount of due diligence. I'll say that. Like when we start like working with like large partners, like the amount of due diligence that the insurance firms will do to underwrite a cyber liability policy is like on the higher end of what some of those do, and for good measure. I mean, it's like there's a lot of things that you could ultimately like say you do, or you can look at like a compliance report, like a SOC 2 or some other type of third party assessment at face value, and ultimately, not dig deeper, and there could be things there that might be like a consideration. But there's a lot of due diligence that goes into that. Probably, like kind of weeks of information gathering, both like scoping the environment, scoping effectively, okay, how much information is there? What kind of controls do you have in place? Do you have certain, types of controls in certain environments? I think, a few years, it seemed like back, a lot of the underwriters of these policies were dead set on looking at things like service accounts, for example, which I think in a typical organization where like you're running your own data set, you might have one or two active directories, like you can minimize service accounts. But in the business where you're cloud native, it might be completely different, where almost everything is like systems connected together. So your non-human identities, your service accounts, like are absolutely like abundant. And trying to keep a serious face when someone asks you, can you keep this down to like 7 service accounts? And you're like in a cloud organization with like, yeah, so you're laughing your ass off. I'm laughing my ass off. But it's like one of these, like, they don't get that. They just, they have this sheet and they say, okay, well, more than 7, like we've seen, compromises where we're paying out premiums on those policies, and they had, 14, but like this one group that had 6 didn't have that, so we'd like to keep it to 7. And it's like, yeah, it's kind of like really an arbitrary number, and doesn't, what it really does is it forces you to kind of like educate those people about like, okay, here's how this technology works, here's why we think we're secure, here's ultimately, the real risks that would expect. I've had to put those type of slide decks together and have those kind of conversations like several times over. So I've really lost track of your initial
That's
question.
good. That's all right. That's right. It was about cyber insurance, and if you felt like cyber insurance had kind of like helped organizations.
Has it helped or hurt?
Yeah.
Well, I think if you're behind on things, it's definitely one of those like that. I know peers that have been in like certain positions where they might not be as I guess grateful for the like generous support that I have with my program, but like they're like not getting the things that they need, and it's something that they can point at. And it's ultimately one of those things that it's a fundamental kind of cost at the high level of building out a program. Is insurance is fundamentally your risk transfer. You're always going to pay for it. So ultimately, ultimately, how much are we going to spend on transferring that risk? The bad things are still going to happen. It's just a matter of like, okay, are we going to recoup that? And I think the other thing to realize is that recouping of like claims against that premium is not immediate. So like there's a delta and a time value there of the money too. So that goes into like what should we be ultimately spending when we kind of put a budget together. And if you're kind of thin on budget for things that are fundamental and you don't have those in place yet, I think it could be quite helpful. On the other hand, I think it's one of those things where since so many people undertook those policies without having some of the fundamental controls in place, and they started like paying out like worse than hurricane zones or whatever, the fact that premiums went up so high kind of hurt places like us where we had like a lower premium, and then like we just kind of rode the wave back up, and then you're fighting to chip it back down, but it's something you need. So.
It's funny to hear you talk about the insurance premium conversation that you had. I had a similar one more on the audit or on the compliance side with FFIEC back in, I think this was 2014-ish or sometime right when I got out of the military, where they'd come in. This was after the $50 million SunTrust breach, if you remember that. And they wanted to look at our vulnerability management report, and they said, show us all your vulnerabilities. And so we said, sure, absolutely, show all our vulnerabilities. And we had something like a million some odd vulnerabilities. I mean, FIS was huge, right? So a million vulnerabilities wasn't that big of a deal. And they instantly, without looking at anything on the report, just looked at the number and saw a million and was like, oh, that's too many. And we were like, well...
No context whatsoever.
No context whatsoever. And we asked them, we said, okay, well, if that's too many, what's the right number? And they were like, well, we don't know. We just know that a million's too many. And to hear you say that about insurance just tells me...
service accounts, a million loans.
Yeah. It just shows that there's still people who are making decisions about what the definition of security is without understanding what those impacts are contextually, to your point, to each organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the other thing is like you brought up vulnerabilities, and that's one of those, like I'm constantly in the kind of like some of these groups where people are like, we're swapping decks, like what do you talk about with your board or whatever, and it's like never ever have we like put up like X vulnerabilities right in front of them. We need to get this down from like 1,200 to 2 or something like that, because it's ultimately like, what's the impact of those things to the business? How does it work in a dollars and cents fashion? Like, are we actually like, is there a tangible loss to the business because of that or not? In some cases, the answer is like, no, not really, type of a thing. Sometimes it's the two, that might remain are like kind of the most critical ones in the world, because they're like outside facing and, like kind of hanging out there on an island. So.
I want to bring us back around to kind of that partnership and that conversation when it comes to the balance between the technology and the compliance and everything else. I imagine when you have that risk conversation, maybe that risk acceptance conversation at the senior leader level, where they're like, hey, we're actually really okay. We think that this risk is acceptable. We don't need to implement this control. And just for chat, when we talk about implement this control, it could be MFA, it could be EDR, although those are really kind of extreme examples. It could be patching a server, it could be putting a WAF in place, it could be upgrading the Windows NT machine on a $10 million production line. Whatever that is, how do you have that conversation where you come back to your technical teams? Because I imagine it's a lot of the technical folks that we have on stream that probably cringe the most when you go back and have to tell them, we're not going to do that control.
Yeah, I think it's just being frank about them and educating them on what's important for the business. I think a lot of what I try to do a lot of times is like point at like, okay, in a very large organization, very hard to point at like a large, like a high level balance sheet or something like that and say, okay, like here's where the company makes money, here's where we spend money, and here's, like what's in between and what's realistic for spending. But ultimately, it's one of those things where it's like, if I kind of put it back into the context of like, what would you do like in your house if you had like a hole in the ceiling or something like that, and what's it being caused by, like a drip in the pipe, or ultimately is it being caused by something more massive like a leak of the roof where it's going to cost you like X $1,000? It's like, okay, would you rather buy like a $35 piece of drywall and like put it up there and patch it up right now, or are you going to go like spend $35,000 to like replace the roof? It's like ultimately that's the type of decision we're kind of making. So they never like to kind of hear that directly in those contexts when we like relate it to something in the home life. I think it really, I've never not had success with that or not gotten alignment. And that's one of the things that's important between like agreement and alignment is like, they might not agree with what I'm doing, but we should align. And ultimately it's like, we have to be good partners to the business, because some situations it's different, but ultimately, like in most people who are, running an organization, like an information security organization within a larger firm, like you're effectively a cost center for the business. So it's like, okay, how can we make that cost impact as, low as possible? What makes difference for the business? So.
I like what you said there. Hopefully somebody clipped that. We don't have to be in agreement, but we do have to be in alignment.
Yeah.
Is
that's a good what do you call it, like general leadership tenet to live by. I think it's helpful.
What do you think? What do you think are some of the most common misalignments in a cybersecurity organization between, say, the technical teams, the GRC teams, either amongst yourselves misalignments, or even those misalignments as they can permeate over into the business?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, like where it comes up in my experience is like, oh, like it was yes to this at this point in time, and now it's like different. And like I think people don't understand on both sides. Like sometimes it's like the business side, and sometimes it's like the security side or the compliance side. Running, I run privacy programs too, and there's those type of elements as well where, the answer was probably like, hey, we could have done this, in 2002 when we did it, we were doing it this way, but now, you're saying we have to do all these other things. Why is it changing? And a lot of it's like, hey, things like change, like the regulatory landscape, and now we have new rules, we have new requirements and obligations that we have to kind of abide by. And so there's alignments with like, people think you get a yes once and it's a yes permanently type of a thing, and that's a constant. I think kind of. It's not a fight, but it's one of those things that comes up where you kind of have to like, how do you handle those conversations? This is an important one. And then also it's just like the alignment between like, do we need to have like a Ferrari, or are we okay like driving down the road in like a Toyota Corolla or something like that, like some more like pedestrian type vehicle that gets us from A to B. Our means of conveyance, does it need to be high end, or could it be your reliable, what do you call it, like grocery getter? So
yeah, just like your daily driver or whatever.
Yeah.
Interesting. I love this conversation because I do think that I think, Chad, as you're listening to this, one of the things that I'm hoping you're understanding is we oftentimes do get frustrated when we see things in the news and we see about unpatched vulnerabilities. I think I saw somebody, I think one of the mods pushed up a poke at Fortinet about it being the new RDP or something like that as well. How problematic is it for you, or how frustrating is it to see vendors, have lax security policies or have vulnerabilities in their infrastructure? How much does that impact kind of like your thoughts on risk?
Yeah, I'd say as far as risk, not so much a risk, but it's always a tough conversation, right?
Yeah.
Like, so if there's like a supplier that we're using that has an issue, and it's primarily like something that's meant to protect like the business or whatever, and it doesn't do that job, or it impacts availability or something along those lines, then it's one of those things like, oh, we haven't had this problem before. Why all of a sudden is it a problem? And I think I said it earlier. It's like people expect that level of certainty at any time, and I think that's like in anything, and all of us kind of like naturally gravitate towards that. Is like you want to know that like things are going to be like predictable and reliable, and they're going to do their job. But then when they do like exactly the opposite of the job that they're supposed to be doing, then there's definitely egg on your face, like transitively anyway. It's like not directly your fault, but ultimately like you own that for the business, and you have to basically find a way to make sure like if it does happen again, the impact's minimized, or hopefully in a perfect world, it's like, okay, like we've understood what the problem is. We can add that, into our third party vetting, or do something where we can likely avoid it in the future. But, always also never guarantee any certainties. That type of a thing is always best practice. So.
You invoked one of my least favorite topics, which was third party management. I very much fight people on this stream over the value on third party management. So this could really determine our future ability to do streams together. So choose your answer very, very carefully on this.
There you go.
Do you find value in third party risk management teams?
Yes. So I'll say I'll fight you on it, but there's value there ultimately. It basically, I think, is a centralized team to kind of help ensure like, is this solution like the right thing for the business and make a recommendation. I think where I kind of like draw the line on like where does like a third party organization start to like not provide value is if it's like a yes or a no type of thing. Like you have to have this as like a rubber stamp type of a deal. I think it's one of those they're best served making a recommendation, letting the ultimate business owner sign off on, okay, like a risk might exist and we have to like watch this risk. But yeah, there's definitely, I think part of it is too, like within cyber, the way that we do it. I'll say it this way, like we use like rating agencies and things like that, like very similar to like what an insurance underwriter will do when like they look at like our business. Like I always want to make sure like across all the sites we have a favorable rating because I know that goes into the calculus of the underwriting because it's side baseball or whatever. But then ultimately it's like we've also had issues where like we've had groups that are on the higher end of the spectrum there, like where they're suppliers for us and they have having an issue. So it's like you got to take all that stuff with a grain of salt. So at the end of the day, it's like, are you combing the snake, as they say, like, and it's like an idiom from Central America where it's basically you're doing some work for vanity or whatever.
Yeah.
That's ultimately like a fine kind of wired across there, but not that there's no value whatsoever, but it's one of those. It's certainly one of those things that can be done better. And I guess if I knew the solution to that immediately, I'd probably be like off to the races with a business of my own trying to figure that out because it's a hard problem, and I've never been to an institution where they're like, oh, this works perfectly well. And I think the best way is like a fast way, but then it's also like the big thing I have a problem with a lot about those programs. It's only like point in time, and how do you like the real problems come up slowly over time. And I think that's true of like any type of risk, not just like third party risk. Is like the biggest problems are not usually like the greatest fear that like you can foresee or whatever. It's like either one of those things that you never saw coming, and usually those things that you never saw coming are like a confluence of like smaller things, either compounding or aggregating, right?
I guess
that's what that kind of a paradigm doesn't do well.
Yeah, and I guess that's where a lot of my cynicism draws from when it comes to third-party risk, because like I as our stewards of risk management, if you will, from a CISO perspective, our job is to enable the business to take risk, and at the end of the day, if the business is going to accept the risk from a cyber risk vendor, and again, I'll admit that this is a completely Neal cynical view on things, so I have no problem admitting it. Like if the business is not willing to heed our risk, our cyber risk when it comes to the risk of a vendor, then third-party risk teams are pretty much useless in that, because if the business is never going to say no, why even have us assess the risk?
Yeah. Well, I think one thing, like maybe people don't understand, like what's inherently, anytime you're outsourcing something or anytime you're using like a third party vendor, like it's inherently more risk than doing it on your own. Yeah. So like you should ultimately, I think, accept the fact that like, okay, like if we have to bring in someone else to do this, we're not going to do it on our own. We don't have as much effective monitoring or oversight or control over what's going on. So fundamentally, there's more risk in that scenario. But then does it align with like the amount of risk appetite? I think like the hardest problem, and you probably have to come up this like a lot more often than I do, being on the sales side of things, where you're on the receiving end of the questionnaires. Okay.
I'm not sales. I'm not sales, Rudy.
Gotcha. Okay. Got it. All right.
Matt, you didn't hear that.
Yeah. All right. Ultimately, though, like if you're the one on the deal side where you're gonna have to like complete the questionnaire, ultimately it's like you're the one under scrutiny, and it's like there's a lot more of that, and it becomes to some extent like busy work or whatever. Like, but or you're asking the same questions that like, oh, it's like, okay, like how could we glean that from like the reports? But sometimes like a lot of people just they want to see like the face behind all the what would you call it, all the chatter on the reports, and sometimes a meeting helps a lot, but that's part of the job, though, right?
So it looks like we got a question from one of our CISOs out on the West Coast, Callie Beefcake. He kind of on this same risk thing, talking about supply chain. He says, are you concerned about global supply chain as geopolitics heat up? I.e. Dell plan to eliminate reliance on Chinese manufacturing for U.S. sold products in 2027. Just a reminder before you answer that, we don't get into politics, but last week we did discuss the importance of geopolitics in our cybersecurity decisions. So just reminding chat that we're not a political stream, but we will talk about the impact of geopolitics on cybersecurity. Go ahead, Rudy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the geopolitical like stability destabilizing, I think like risks more than just like cyber. Like there's probably like economic risk there that, as well. Is it something I'm staying up at night bothering myself about? Like no, and that's like just a matter of practicality because I'm not in a business that's like global at this point. So it's like I kind of focus on the risks that are going to impact us. I think if I were in a different business, I'd think completely differently about it. But I think ultimately, like you see what happened during the pandemic when like a supply chain seized up, everything was set up to be so like on demand, and then like, you know, all the brakes stopped, and then ultimately, it took probably 18 to 20 months to get back going again. Like I remember I put a kind of a down payment on a car, like Ford Bronco or whatever. Like it was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like I'm sitting at home doing nothing. Like this will be awesome when we go back out again. I didn't end up getting that thing until like 2022 or something like that,
Yeah.
2023. So that's how long it took for like something you take for granted to just kind of get back up and spinning. So I think ultimately, if we're in a global business and that's like super important for us, and we're worried about like getting new hardware out of China or wherever it's manufactured. Like I think that's just something you should be raising, I guess, to your executive panel is like, hey, it's something we should watch. Are we collectively worried about this? My certain situation, I'm not. So
Oh, interesting. You bring up the pandemic, and I didn't have this on our topic list to talk today, but just since it came, I told you we'd get down some rabbit holes if it happened. When
it's like,
when I was at Abbott when the pandemic happened, and I remember distinctively, the change to all of our BCP-DR policies for things like pandemic-related activities and everybody having to immediately. Did you get roped into a lot of that? Like, oh my God, do we need to have a whole lot
yeah.
of contingency plans for another pandemic in the world?
Yeah. I think like as far as like revising DR, like, there's effectively just needed to be revised because so much like change from architecture level, but a lot of it was like, okay, like how are the controls like in a remote environment adequate to the same extent that
Mhm.
they're adequate in a in a like kind of office driven environment? So there's a lot of work around that and trying to ensure we reach parity because I don't know anyone that wasn't in like some kind of a scramble to get that going, right? So there are very few where they were fortunate, but yeah, we definitely did a lot of work. I feel like that was most of like the end of 2020 into
Mm-hmm.
2021 for my life. So
Yeah, yeah. Couple questions from chat. Chat really
yeah,
racked up the questions here quite a bit.
great.
Which of Middle River says, do you think the era of offline password manager is here? Would you think it's mandatory for personal users and computers? MFA being mandatory. So like you'd mentioned a little bit on passwordless. You'd mentioned a little bit on the changing technologies when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Kind of what's your take on a lot of this?
I'm a firm MFA everywhere advocate type of a thing. Like even if it's not like I'm fortunate, right? Because we basically have like a kind of financial industry compliance mandate where if like the system can get to customer information at some point, like if you can ever possibly touch that, like it should have an MFA. So there's a easy, kind of easy path to do that. I know like some people are not as fortunate to have that similar, kind of mandate, like pressing that, down and ensuring that the business does that. But um, I, I like passkeys a whole lot. I don't think they're ubiquitously easy to use and understand at this point. But I can foresee a future, maybe, like 5, 10 years down the road where like I never have to type a password in again, unless it's like for something very immaterial or whatever. It's, uh, it's always hard to kill like the very first technology that works or whatever. But I think as all that technology becomes available on devices to have like FIDO2 and
Mm-hmm.
built into whatever you have, that's gonna be one of those things. So I think yeah, it's kind of on the cusp of going away, but probably it's like everything, right? It happens like not as quickly as you think, but like then all of a sudden it's done, right?
Yeah, I think that last statement is probably the key piece there because like I'm also cynical on this. I don't think that stuff ever goes away. Like you still got AS400s with 8 character passwords that can't
Yeah,
do
well, I
case
think it's like
sensitive.
your home routers are going to have like some kind of a path. It's going to be there, but it's like, is it going to be the primary thing?
Yeah.
Like, hopefully not. Then it's like the age old question. Like the worst things always happen from like the stupidest like oversights or misconfigurations, and it's like, okay, because we're not using the passwords, do we completely forget that they're there? But they kind of are, and it's like, how long is it going to take for them to completely go away? It's like string copy function in C libraries, like they're still floating out there somehow, and they always come up, and it's unbounded, memory things. Like, how are we going to get away from that?
Well, let's talk about this a little bit, because I think you and I had a great conversation in the green room and previously about business buy-in and things like that. And I think passwords and MFA specifically, and I tell this story I absolutely throw Abbott under the bus. Like, they had one of the first incidents I dealt with there was, social engineering of the help desk, where they were trying to get into the CFO's, Aon retirement account, right? And that happened in 2015, and it wasn't until 2018 where they finally started an MFA rollout. And this gets to speak to the kind of that partnership between security and business. How do you cope with 3 years of an MFA deployment? How do you convince the business to move faster? How do you convince the business that, like, you literally just saw this happen? Why do we need to wait 3 years for this to happen?
Yeah. I personally hate to use FUD, right? As far as like my carrot in the conversation type of a thing. But it's also one of those, like, if I were in that same situation and we saw, like, like MGM, for example, or like Uber, I think they all were like very similar things where like the help desk was, very much kind of coerced into, like, getting those credentials up, and probably pretty well use case by now. But it's also one of those, there's other ways you can kind of handle that, is like up the simulations on those people and say, okay, are we actually, like, vulnerable to this, given the, the susceptibility of the humans behind it, and then use that data to kind of like paint the story too. Like, maybe the case is, you're not comfortable with, like, the pace of the rollout, but like the data on the behavior tells you, okay, it's less and less likely that these people are going to click through or respond. They're pretty vigilant, and maybe I'm the one that needs to, like, kind of like slow the roll and, like, eat a little bit. But on the flip side, if the data shows like, hey, people are just like talking to whoever, clicking whatever, and the risk seems to be escalating and growing, then you kind of have to get into that FUD zone. But I like to only use that as like last resort if necessary. But it's just like, we got to all get better about that as a profession, about what's our narrative like.
Get better about, like, delivering the what's in it for me when it comes to leadership. Yeah.
And I think a lot of, like, these technologies, no one likes to, like, mess around with their password, or like everyone's password gets locked out or changed or whatever. So ultimately, if you can make it more frictionless, then it's like, hey, you have to just touch a UV key, or use the fingerprint reader instead of the password. It's a lot easier. So.
Yeah, I think I think that's always the struggle that I see, right? Is how do you balance, like, how do you convince an organization that adding security controls can actually be less impactful than what they think it is when it comes to implementation?
Yeah. I think it's ultimately the implementation. It's hard to get going, but then, like, once you're there, and basically it's kind of, you get a rhythm to it, and people are adopting it, then they see the value, and then you let other people speak for it on your behalf, right? If it actually makes your life easier, they're going to say, hey, I have this thing from the security guys, why haven't they turned it on for you yet? That kind of thing.
It looks like you struck a nerve with a couple folks over the phishing awareness.
Oh, great.
Callie Beefcake says, speaking of social engineering, how important is culture to you as part of your security strategy?
Oh, like, well, probably the top thing. Like, if you don't have, like, the right culture of vigilance around things, like, you're going to be one of those CISOs that burns out, I think, in like 18 months. I think I'm, like, very very grateful for the fact that we have, like, a strong vigilant culture.
Did you inherit that, or did you have to build it?
There's a little bit of building. There's a little bit of, like, hey, we had to ultimately kind of like change the ideas on who can install what, like, who has such liberal, what do you call it, like, access rights and things like that. So there's a bit of building, and then a bit of it is I think being like a tech forward company helps a lot too. I think it would be a lot different if we were not, like, tech focused, that's for sure. So I can't take 100% credit for it, but there was a deliberate effort to like, kind of build that up, and especially as we introduced, like, those type of programs, because they kind of didn't, like, exist as aggressively before we came in. And it's like, people also, they don't like failing, but you got to let them know that, like, hey, this isn't like a failure. It's like the opportunity to learn. And the idea is, like, you'll see this thing, and we don't create things like in, kind of phishing simulations where they're just, like, random. It's based on, like, things we're actually seeing that would viably, like, kind of like happen against us. So like actual like threat groups are using these tactics, and we want to emulate and understand where we're at so that we can like make adjustments in training if necessary.
If somebody's listening who's obviously there's some culture things that are going on, that people are interested in when it comes to building a good security culture. If somebody was trying to figure out how to do that in their org, give me 3 things right here, right now that somebody could walk away from this stream and try to work on if they were trying to either fix or build a good security culture in their org.
Yeah. Okay. So fixing security culture, first understand the perspective of the people that you're trying to change the culture of. Know for yourself. Why is the change important? So like if you can't articulate that for yourself and for your team, you're not gonna be able to like articulate it to the stakeholders that need to help. And I think that's the third point is you have to employ help to change the culture as well. Like you can't come in like a bull in a china shop, like I'm the new guy, I'm going to change everything. You just got to listen to me because they hired me. It's like you have to really kind of understand, take a bit of like the humble pill and go into learning mode and understand like what's important in the business, who are the people that can help influence the change, and from their perspective understand why, like what motivates like certain areas, especially if there's a problem area, and how can you change that. Because I think the other thing is like most of the time people are not going to bring you into a situation where you're set up to fail type of a thing. And if that's like a known thing that you can discover before you've been hitting the ground running, that's like one of those first 90 days things that you address, type of a deal. So
I love that we're talking about this because like that was one of my drivers in coming to Query was I wanted to build a culture of security, especially from a startup perspective, and it's amazing how it makes your job as a CISO a lot easier when you are surrounded by people who value security at the same level that you do. It makes risk conversations a lot easier. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Outcast asked a really good question, I thought. As CISO,
Okay.
What are your feelings towards using managed services versus building out an internal team? Probably talking about your SOC mostly.
Yeah, so I guess full disclosure, I've come from a background where like the first big chunk of my career was within managed services, and I have a lot of like respect for that. So I think it's one of those, depends on your needs, right? I think like if you need like a lot of broad visibility and you're getting threats from everywhere, like there's probably no better way to get that from like a managed service provider. But then I think on the other hand, it's like I have an internal team and they're awesome. And like the reason we have the internal team is no one's going to know the infrastructure better than we do, type of a thing. So you're never going to get that like kind of like quick curated answer. Is this something like it's like really concerning we need to dig into, or is it just an alarm that like, hey, like I don't know, like I'm only 80% confident, so I have to like bring it to your attention, and that may or may not be helpful. So I think it really depends on like what's the type of the business. Ultimately, I think if you need to operate at a scale that's like not tenable, and there's a service provider that can do it at a fraction of a price, and that's the part of the program where you have to you have to down your spend because you have to spend on more expensive controls or detective capabilities. That might be something that that you have to do, but it's like there's no one firm answer to that. I think it's like there's always the trade-offs, and I think it's the right case for a lot of places, especially as like the breadth needs to scale. But then the trade-off that you're doing is okay. Like you still need someone internally that really understands what's going on because you're only going to be able to go so far with a managed service provider. So.
I think that that context, you said it before. I think that context is key, right? A managed service provider, as great as, and again, like I was a SecureWorks customer, for 2 companies that I worked at. I've dealt a lot with managed service providers, but as great as they are, as awesome as they can be at helping you solve problems, one of the things that they lack most anything else is they don't understand your environment the same way that you do.
Yeah. That's and nor the environment nor the kind of like inner workings, how to get things done like as quickly as possible, that type of a thing. It's always a balance.
Yeah. Another good question from Chad. The Bayou Beast says, what are some of the misperceptions or missteps that you see occur whenever security practitioners engage, communicate with senior management or business units? How can security practitioners better prepare for those conversations/engagements?
Yeah. Really, really dig in and learn the business and understand like what is the business about, because I think a lot of especially like I'll call them like mid-career, like they're very senior type technologists, but like maybe junior on the like, hey, I'm like kind of reaching the executive level. Like they talk in a lot of jargon, and they don't like simplify it down to, okay, like what's the problem? What's the risk? Like, what does that mean to you, business person? What are the options? Is it going to cost to do that? I think that's the other thing too, is like coming in with like a singular solution is another kind of pitfall that I think a lot of people fall into. It's like always come in like at least three, like a good, better, best kind of proposal. It's like, hey, we could do this, but X, Y, Z, and then really, kind of give some agency and autonomy to the person who it's ultimately going to affect, which is usually the person whose budget's going to have to, be tapped to fix said problem. So.
Well, let me ask you this: is if somebody who's in that mid tier, or even somebody who's younger, coming up through the ranks, how would they, like, if they were to walk away from this stream and go to their leadership and want to get involved into more of those conversations? Yeah. What are some way that they could frame that conversation with either their mid tier manager or a director to kind of get into that conversation a little bit better?
Yeah, I would, like, the most clever way I've ever heard, and actually use this and it's helpful, is find someone, like whoever, like wherever you sit in the organization, there's probably like some equivalent person within finance or whatever. Ask them how the dollar moves through the business. Like when we sell something, like how do we get that money in? Like, where does that money go? Who gets paid out? Like, where does the budget go to? And then ultimately, okay, like what comes out at the end? And then I'll really kind of help you understand, okay, like what's really important to this business? What are like the really, really big inputs, really big outputs? And then when you kind of frame, like the urgency around certain things, you can take that context into consideration. If there's a problem on a system that's serving, some kind of like exploratory research and development partnership, you're just serving up and there's nothing important behind it, versus something that like might be a little glitch that causes like something that might be an innocuously small availability bug, but you're kind of like a high scale business that does a lot of transactions per minute, and it's going to end up causing hundreds of $1,000s of losses, like in the matter of like a short period of time. Like, you got to be able to like understand, okay, like they might look the same in a console as far as like, okay, like there's this problem, potential vulnerability here, this other potential vulnerability there, like understand like what's the business impact behind that. And you can become, I think, really successful really quickly just understanding that stuff. But it takes you kind of getting out of your comfort zone, stepping out of the box that you've been in, and kind of really learning something new from a different perspective of how the business operates.
Let me pull one thread on that before we wrap up, because we're coming to the top of the hour. Yeah. One of the common misconceptions that I think I see from chat frequently, right, is like, hey, this all sounds really, really good, but I never want to go into management. I just want to stay hands on keyboard. I just want to keep being a threat hunter or a SOC analyst or an incident responder or a pen tester even for the rest of my career. Do you think that the advice that you've given here today about understanding the business, understanding how a dollar moves through the organization, do you think that is applicable at all levels inside of security, whether you want to be in leadership or not?
I would say so. Like, do you think otherwise? I don't know why it would hurt for anyone at any level to kind of understand. Like, I think no matter, like, if you are on like the corporate side on a corporate security team, where you're really like, you are not the product. You're not like providing your security expertise as part of the product. Like, being passionate about the business that you're in is going to help you bring like the best energy every day to your job and really care about what you're doing. And if you don't care about that, like maybe the solution isn't like, I need to get more technical. Maybe it's like, get within a business that you really care about. And then ultimately you'll thrive more there than you will anywhere else. Either that, or just, become part of the, part of the security infrastructure, right? Or the industrial complex, as it were, right?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, and I wanted you to say it out loud for the people in the back to hear, that it does not matter where you exist in the security organization. Understanding the business is the most important thing for us at the end of the day. Rudy, we are at the top of the hour. We have hit a ton of questions and a ton of topics. It feels like I can't believe it moved this fast.
It flew by.
It flew by. We got to have you back. Before I cut you loose, is there?
I guess I answered the vendor question right then. So.
Yeah.
Probably not, but
yeah, it's all right. Anything you want to leave the guys with before I send you along your way?
Never stop learning. I think that's the thing is like, you're gonna hit the wall about what you can learn in security, for maybe like a brief minute every once in a while, but there's always like this whole, like adjacent world to you that like you can't like stick your head in the sand like an ostrich and ignore. So, understand what's going on around you, and you'll be more effective at what you do. It's just never ending thing, like the Red Queen, right? Keep running the same place. So.
Absolutely. Rudy, I'll talk to you later. I'm going to talk to my chat here for a second before we cut off. Chat, that was a fantastic one. Absolutely love it. Rudy was an amazing guest. Been dying to get Rudy on. Super excited for that. Real quick on some programming notes before I cut y'all off for the rest of the day. Thank you so very much for being super flexible this week. I know we missed Tuesday's threat brief. Had some things come up as I was traveling to Atlanta. We'll be doing that one tomorrow afternoon, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure you do tune in for that. There is a giveaway live in Discord right now. We're giving away 3 more Try Hack Me vouchers, care of the team at BitLift. And then based on your feedback on who I should have bet on for DraftKings for the Super Bowl, I went ahead and bought 3 $50 vouchers for Hack the Box to kind of offset the Try Hack Me love. So there's 3 Hack the Box vouchers and 3 Try Hack Me voucher giveaways hanging out in Discord. Make sure you hit that ! Discord, hop over to Discord and sign up for that giveaway. This giveaway is going to go a week. We're going to make this giveaway last all the way till Wednesday, so you'll have tons of time to participate in this, because next Wednesday we're going to hit you with a SecDataOps next Wednesday. I'm going to have yet another global CISO that's going to come hang out with me next Wednesday. Troy Wilkinson, amazing CISO, hugely popular in the CISO community. He's done a lot of great things, and so we're going to bring yet another CISO on here to come get you another perspective on who you can, some of these questions that you've gotten, things like that. So super excited for next week's SecDataOps with Troy on that one. And then so no tea with a hacker tomorrow morning. I'm sorry, no tea in the morning. I've got a meeting at 9 o'clock, but I'll make it up to you 3 o'clock in the afternoon with the threat brief, and the giveaways are active inside Discord. So with that being said, whether you're on the red side or the blue side or still deciding, as Rudy said, keep learning, and I'll see y'all tomorrow.
Looking for friends, wondering if you really might be the one. You know that you perfect, you shine like the sun. You making me chase it, you know that I run. I'm never gonna stop till I stop having fun. Ayy, you've been acting like a stranger. Said you see me later, but you